commitment, promise that you make towards a person, or it can be a course of action. You don't give up easily because you make a promise. There's a dedication of effort and time to try to make it work.
Hello everybody, welcome back to a new episode of Henri and Mike. Today is the 29th of July 2022. It is a Friday. At the moment it's about 1:51 p.m. in the afternoon. Now we are here and all the tea houses here in Singapore.
We are at this place called Tea Chapter. It's a tea house in Singapore based near Tanjong Pagar. The nearest landmark, in fact, is Chinatown Maxwell Food Center. It's just maybe like 5 minutes walk from there. When Singapore first started, way back, there's like a lot of shop houses around this area. That's where all the tea merchants basically settle. This tea chapter, this tea house has been around for maybe 100 years or so, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, so you know, Queen Elizabeth II, the monarch queen of England, she actually came to this tea house when she was young. Yeah, I think maybe probably in 1960, end of 1960s or something, once when Singapore gained its independence, it came over. She was sitting in this exact room that we are currently at. So historical.
She's sitting at my position, right?
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So this tea house, there are 3 different types of tea concept. One is based on a Chinese tea culture. It's on the second level. And then the other side, there's actually a Japanese way of brewing tea. And on top, at the attic, is actually the Korean way of doing tea. So they basically try to encourage people to experience the Asian way of brewing tea as compared to those in India or maybe even in like Europe, East Asian generally. This is really a quick introduction about Tea Chapter as a tea house in Singapore.
If you're watching from YouTube, this is what you see all the visual. It's really authentic. This is the second time that I'm here actually, because the first time when Very, the friend of ours, visited us here in Singapore, we brought her to here. Back then we were in another room,
the
like
Japanese room.
Yeah. So it's like tatami whereby you sit on the floor.
Exactly.
But the room we are in right now is a Chinese tea house concept. So you sit on a chair basically.
Yeah.
And it's like a marble table and you have all the different decoration around you, like the Chinese calligraphy behind us, for instance. So let's start. How's your week, Mike?
So far, so good. Yeah. Great that it's Friday again.
1 week passed so quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very fast. Like every day you're doing something, working, trying to settle things, run errands and all that. So it has been a week. It's like, wow, time really flies, really. It has been great. I think it was a productive week, to be honest. Yeah, but how about you? How's everything?
This week has been really productive. I was really consistent. Waking up 5 a.m. in the morning, went for my CrossFit.
Right.
Things just fall into places. And I try to work early in the morning and it's been productive. So I got all the afternoon to do other stuff. So most of the time, the heavy lifting is in the morning. So I find it good. Do you have a word for this week already?
I don't have a word, but because it's end of July, so every year at the end of July, there are 2 main things that happens, or rather like I look forward to. First is my wedding anniversary. So this is the 4th year that I'm actually got married. Will be on 1st August. That's where my wedding anniversary is. The second thing is Singapore's National Day, which falls on the 9th of August every single year.
It's true, it's coming.
So usually when it comes to August, these are the 2 main things that I will always look forward to. So I think because of these 2 things, over this past week, I have been thinking a little bit more about what these 2 events mean to me. I start to realize that the word might be commitment. I would say that it's more like a promise that you make towards a person, or it can be a course of action. You don't give up easily because you make a promise. There's a dedication of effort and time to try to make it work. But just talking about the 2 events, one is on a national level, the other one is more on the personal level, right? So I think the personal level is about relationship, how you try to bring each other closer towards a common goal, trying to go through and optimize the process as much as possible. But on the national level, first thing that comes to my mind is sovereignty, right? So that has to do with defense. Why a nation actually commit to defend itself, probably for its survival and its existence. And that's where I dig deeper into the motivation of a person or an organization, or even a bigger thing like a nation, towards the cause that they believe in. And then as I was thinking, there was also an element of, because of pandemic, there was a great resignation, and then people start to do jobs, having roles that are shorter. So in a professional setting, why do people commit and why do people commit less? So essentially these three things just drill down further into something like, why do a person or an organization or a nation commit to something? What's the real reason behind it? What's the real motivation?
So what do you think, what's the real motivation behind it then?
I think by and large it's survival. When I try to look at it from a short-term to long-term perspective, like you say, professionally, in olden days probably is where people will commit themselves to a job for their entire life, maybe the way that our grandparents or even our great-grandparents,
Even our parents.
even our parents, right? They actually commit to an organization for the longest time ever. But why is it like during our generation, you start to see the shift?
Because here, there's another dimension that comes in. Not only because of macroeconomic perspective, like for instance, COVID happened or the countries is not really doing well. So it kind of, in a way, force you to be more innovative. For instance, what we're doing right now is called new media. Basically, anyone can pick it up and do it. But what's the reason of doing it? Because you want to forge a new path for yourself, for you to grow further. And that's exactly what we talk about, like in 2 episodes away.
When we were at Juche, right?
Exactly.
It all points towards survival. Even as a nation, why do you defend? It has to do with survival. So essentially, we're looking at the benefits. Like, what do you get out of it as an individual, or as a single person or single country, right? Like, why? And then even in marriage form, it might not be survival. It might be truly finding a partner that you feel that can complement you to walk that path together to explore whatever that you believe that life should be like.
In terms of national wise, when you talk about survival shit, what I can think of is you're protecting your borders. You want to achieve that harmonious state and stability within your own territory. Because when you have stability, it means that there's an opportunity for you to grow, like economically as well as a person. Because you're in a safer environment for you to grow. It's the same concept of investment. When an investor looking at a place to invest in, they will look at whether this country or this politics in this country is stable before they make that decision. Like mostly from the investor's perspective.
Right.
Of course, there are some other hedge fund whereby they think different. They bet against that, but that's different strategy. So that's one thing national-wise. Career-wise, to some extent, is also because of stability. You are at a certain stage, and what you want to do is to get better and better. So which means that you tend to climb the corporate ladder because you want to get better status, you want to get better package or benefits. So once you have those, you can improve on your life in some way or the other. So I think that's my understanding or my perception, perspective of commitment in that sense. But I think ultimately you want to talk about your marriage, right? I mean, the 4th year anniversary. So I think let's come back to that part. So commitments. Let's just look at commitment, because I'm sure that the other half of yours is actually listening here right now or looking or watching from YouTube. What do you have to say about commitment in terms of your loved one, like the one you married to? Oh la la.
Secret's gonna be out. When I look at it, yes, I think there is a goal that you set out when you first decide to walk the path together. Very similar to how a nation wants to set a goal to defend itself. So I think that it's a bit, to me, leaning more towards a non-negotiable, where you have already set your target, your goal, and then what then you do is to do your best. Whatever resources you have, whatever hurdles that you're going to meet along the way, you try your best to work out together to cross it. And then there's also this element of you don't give up easily. Like, you don't walk away because you actually gave your promise. And I feel that it's very important. It trains your resilience. It trains so-called like your discipline, consistency in trying to approach, always resolute in trying to find a path forward, right? As compared to when you are more fickle, you have not given your promise and so-called dedicate your time and effort towards something, a cause. That's where there's always an easier way out for you to say, okay, that doesn't work for me. I will just give it up. And that doesn't train your character to a large extent, I feel. And especially so in a marriage where you live with that person day to day. In your daily life, there's a lot of mundane stuff, running errands. There's a emotion that comes in and here. I have a bad day or I have a good day. And then the emotion will spark some kind of response from the other person. How do you deal with that? Or even family's issue, for example, how do you tackle that? So these are all the kind of things when it comes to commitment. You know, as a process, you commit to that cause and you try to find a way forward as compared to you don't commit at all.
I mean, to some extent, I find that's noble, what you just mentioned, because that's how our human conditions, talking from the heterosexual perspective, is being defined, like a marriage or a commitment in that sense. In our practice of where we grew up, it's just like that. So one partner kind of policy. But then if let's say you look at people who are outside of heterosexuality, who are outside of the LGBTQ
The LGBT,
community, or however way you want to define that, they have different approach to that. Even nowadays, there are many countries in the world whereby you are allowed to marry, enjoy the same rights as a heterosexual, which to some extent I find is good. But within the homosexual world, there are different practices. Like being married is being committed to the person, yes. And there are some people who practice monogamy, but there are also some people who don't practice that even though they're married. So for that, it's mostly like you're committed in a sense of the mental part. But after some years, most of the people will go on to the open relationship whereby they will have different partners. For years, I spent thinking about that whole concept. It works for some people, some couple who are married who are doing that, but then you do see and do experience those different human emotions there as well, like jealousy, envious. So I was just wondering all the time, if that's the case, then why do you want to do that? You see, then what's the commitment part? You no longer commit to each other in that sense. But then they always argue differently. Say, no, we're still committed to each other in a mental state, but we're just not committed to each other on a physical state.
So there is a mental commitment, there is a physical commitment. These are already two different so-called layers. Is there any other layers that we can actually zoom in?
From what I look at it is that those who are on that path, like an open relationship, they do have that commitment to each other, but how they define it is differently because they want their relationship to be optimized, to be happy in that sense. You know, that is still covered, be it from the sex, be it from the mental exchange, idea exchange. So that's why they separate that. But when you come down to it, some people agree on that, some people don't, which is totally fine because everyone has different opinion towards that. But when you compare to some of the homosexual couple who are committed in a relationship, who really practice that, like to the death we part, that's, I find it very novel because you really commit to one person. But having said that, that's also a rule or a norm that's being determined by humans. Stated in Bible, right? One man, one woman. And also stated in different culture about that. The definition is very traditional, let's put it this way. It's very conservative. So many different nations like the Western world or some of the Eastern Asian society has move on to that. You are able to marry whoever you want, right? So that's called big love, and love is love basically, which I mean, in my opinion, I agree on that. I just think that it is novel to really commit to one person. From my own personal view and also from my own personal experience, I do think it is novel to just do that because when you are in a relationship with so many people, it is very tiring, very exhausting.
One thing, as you're saying this, I think it probably doesn't apply to on a national level about defense and sovereignty, but maybe towards career and even towards like relationship, marriage, all that. It's about temptation, an opportunity out there that will lure you and sway you away from commitment.
The word you use, temptation, the word you use, commitment, it is all defined by someone. We are arguing based on those definitions. So if you don't agree on the definition, then obviously you have different
You can argue until the cows come home and there's no solution or there's no outcome and conclusion to that, right?
Yeah. So I think as long as you have that within you and you are living on that motto and you don't hurt others, I think that's fine because that's your decision and that's my decision. So
is there something that is really different between the East and the West when it comes to commitment? Actually, I'm just thinking about this because the main difference between the East and the West a lot of time is about individualism versus collectivism, right? So when it comes to the Eastern part of things, when you're married or when you commit yourself into a relationship, of course it's the union of two people, but emphasis becomes husband and wife coming out as a unit. But in a Western concept is, yes, there's a union of things, but individualism and individual characters and personality will still shine through. I think in the olden days, if you look at the Eastern part, there is always this aspect of things like the female will marry into the male's family and then they will probably take on the male's surname. I think that is a very traditional way of looking at marriage, and it embodies what the olden way of, the old thinking, right? But in today's society, I guess some part this still exists in some of the Eastern society.
Not only Eastern, but some of the Western society as well. It still exists.
Basically more conservative, if I want to generalize it that way. So collectivism from that perspective becomes very strong because women comes in and then men is on top, and then you marry into the family, that becomes one unit, and then this one unit will then deal with the outside world or the social circle basically.
That's a conservative
It's a very conservative part I'm talking about. But from a Western perspective, if I generalize it might not be the best example, but the individualism part still comes in quite strongly.
It is, because in
Yes.
Germany, for instance, be it a husband, wife, or husband can also choose to retain their surname or have the
Yes.
other partner to change their surname to theirs.
Exactly.
So it's a reverse way. So no doubt that families is a single unit of our society, like single block of our society. But how it functions, I think, differs. The individualism part in the West is still very stark, very strong and evidence in those. So I think at the end of the day, just commitment is really how you define it, and whether the other half is able to agree with you. And that's important, because your values and frequencies should not be too far apart from each other. Otherwise, it does not make any sense. Okay, just to sum it up just now, like everyone has their own perspective and definition of that. As long as you're aligned with each other on it, then sign the paper, whatever it is, to make you move forward. Yeah. Or if you disagree with us, you're very welcome to write in the comments below. Like, I would love to see your comments. Let's conclude this episode. The words for this week, for this episode, is commitment. Thank you very much for listening and watching us. And I hope this setting, you do enjoy that. Next time we're in Singapore, don't forget to come to Tanjong Pagar Tea Chapter. We'll list everything, the details in the comment below, so you can find it. So do come by, have a cup of tea. You know, it's really relaxing. It's just like you are doing your catch up. In Swedish, people call it fika, like coffee and cinnamon bun.
Right? Yeah, but it's just a tea
German,
form.
people call it Kaffeekuchen. You know, it's just the whole process of talking to each other and enjoying the tea or the coffee along the way. So be kind to yourself, take care of each other. Don't forget to smile. And very importantly, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. So this is Henry.
And this is Mike.
We shall see you in the very next episode.
Signing off.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.